All right, welcome back to the Fabric of Culture podcast. I'm incredibly excited today because my guest is a literal media mogul. He is the co-founder of Complex Media, which, in my opinion, is one of the most culturally relevant media publications of the modern generation. And he now has his hand in so many different things, including as being the CEO of Uproxx, which we'll get
No,
into
no,
later.
no, not CEO,
Not
executive
CEO,
chairman.
executive
Executive
chairman. Okay,
chairman. No
I
day to
appreciate.
day, no day-to-day roles, my friend.
Got it. Got it. So please, everyone, welcome Rich Antoniello. Rich, how you doing today?
Very good. Excited to be here.
Awesome.
What and you know what I love? I mean, obviously I'm a big fan, but I also think the namesake of your effort is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it took a while to come up with, but fashion so much intersects so much of our daily lives and so many industries. So I felt like it was a very apt name. So really
It
appreciate it.
is. And also it finally is trying, and as you know, I fought for 25 years about this, trying to get culture its due on the level of impact and influence it actually has on every industry is the understatement of the year.
Absolutely. Of the century, potentially. So
Of this, I'm with you. I like that.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, let's get into it. I've obviously heard a lot of your podcasts, and you know how your entire journey is so inspiring. But for my audience that isn't familiar, when you first started out, there was not really a blueprint for what Complex has become, or even what you were trying to get it started. So tell us a little bit about your early life, how you grew up, and how that really began to set you up for success when you decided to start Complex.
So I'm going to go really fast here because I'm old, so I have a long arc.
Totally fair.
Look, I'm a Brooklyn kid. So I grew up, and for me, hip hop and sneakers, I know it sounds, but growing up in the mid 80s, right when sneaker culture exploded, like you have to remember, the Air Maxes were launched when I was in high school. Air Jordans were launched when I was in high school. A lot of these kids probably don't even understand how long those brands have been the icons that they are. I mean, so the only four pairs of shoes I ever wore in all of high school are Air Jordans, Air Maxes, Shell Toes, and Air Force Ones, literally, right?
Wow.
So, hip hop, sneakers, that all those cultural elements were very important to me. But growing up as a kid in Brooklyn, very lower middle class to lower class, I really wanted to get the hell out of there. So I used to think like, oh, I have to get into like finance and other things like that. So went to school, thought I was going to be a finance guy, did an internship at a large scale M&A shop, hated it, pivoted to marketing, fell in love with marketing and advertising, got to work at Saatchi and Saatchi, worked on Procter and Gamble, was part of the Tide team, which was their flagship. Then I went and worked at Men's Journal, Winter Media, Rolling Stone, Us Magazine, Men's Journal. And then I launched a magazine called Adventure inside of National Geographic. So I got to be an intrapreneur, which is basically being an entrepreneur with training wheels.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met up with Mark and Seth and had an opportunity to kind of think about what Complex could be. And that was the meld for me of all of my corporate experience and my entrepreneur stuff combined with my passions as an individual person, which were all of, like, if you think about the stools of the legs of the stools of Complex, which are fashion, like style. Let's call it style because fashion's a dirty word in certain respects, right?
Of course.
Style, sneakers, hip hop, and then hip hop is a culture as well. Like that's the one thing that I think a lot of our competitors from a cultural perspective were just music. What we were always was hip hop culture first with music as a component. And I think, getting to do that and make that into a real business for me was the most exciting thing in the world. And probably a big reason why we were able to be so strong on the qualitative side, and using that experience to be so strong on the quantitative side of building the business as well.
Got it. Okay. No, totally makes sense. And then on that point of culture, like when you start a business in any industry, like there's the little steps, but what was either a big leap or like a really big signal when it comes to culture that said, "Hey, I actually think we have something really big here."
Oh, so first of all, that's an excellent question. So, and I'm going to conflate two different things at the same time. So we
Okay.
launched as a magazine in '02, right? And as a magazine inside of a fashion house, Echo, the Rhino, 1972.
Mm-hmm.
So, we didn't have, people previously, a lot of people who had successful magazine launches came from like Hearst or Condé or Rodale, and they had leverage, right? So they had other magazines, they had leverage with newsstands, they had blow-in cards of other things, they could do direct mail pieces, all of those cost structures. We had none of that, right? To launch. Even though we did that, we launched the magazine in May of 2002. By the end of 2006, we were already break even. And I know 3.5 years doesn't sound like that short, but believe me, from a magazine perspective, that was lightning fast. It was probably half the time most magazines took to break even.
Oh yeah.
And we were going to start making money. And I realized, like, look, it's very, to fight that hard to get to break even, it's very hard to argue to change something. But this is the end of '06, and the internet was really blowing up. Now, social media was still very tangential, right? You had like MySpace, Friendster, stuff like that. You don't have Facebook, you don't have Twitter, you definitely don't have Instagram or TikTok or any of these things, right? So the internet and the web itself is the kind of engine that is growing, right, from a youth culture perspective. And I'm like, listen, I went to Seth and our CFO at the time and said, good news, bad news is, good news is we just broke even. Bad news is I'm going to take all of our profits in the next year and put it into us pivoting hard into digital.
Mm.
And by the way, this is back in '07. It used to cost $1.5 million to $2 million to build a website, which now, of course, you can do for about 1 penny.
Exactly.
So right, but different world. And I was like, all right, look, we're only going to probably make about $2 million, so we can't go all in just on complex.com.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we start a digital ad network on an exclusive basis where we'll take the leverage of our brand as complex as this, cultural zeitgeist, basically. And we're going to go and aggregate the best sneaker sites, the best music sites, obviously hip hop driven, the best style and shopping, and the best culture stuff. So those were our 4 verticals. Those were also the sections in the magazine. And what we did is we started to aggregate these websites on an exclusive basis. We would trade traffic, and then we would also monetize it in aggregate. So we had a ton of scale very quickly. And what we didn't realize is by choosing the best voices within each of those, we didn't go to just, big, large scale aggregates of .coms that everybody else was, because it was scale. We were like, who is creating the best content out there? So like Matt at Nice Kicks and SK at Na Right and Hoff at On Smash, and all these massively influential blogs that by the time Facebook popped off and Twitter popped off, those best voices were the ones that were getting amplified, because the bloggers of yesterday were the creators of today. So we got all of this because we had the best voices in class all around everything culture, which if you think about youth culture, let's say the scale started to tip in '04, '05, where really hip hop as a culture defined youth culture. It was, but previously there was a lot of different influences and things like that, but that's where it tipped over. So we were ahead of the curve from a cultural perspective. We had a better model from a digital and an audience perspective, and we had financial discipline because we had a great sales team and a great marketing team from the overhang of the magazine. And all we did was put all those pieces together. And that really was the origination of complex networks, complex media, complex networks.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And so from collecting, the best of the best voices and wanting to be in some of those really popular spaces, what viewpoint did Complex take when it comes to fashion? Because that
So,
was like
you know,
streetwear in Complex is something that I very deeply remember when I first started following along so long ago.
so I'm going to really date myself. People don't understand, like, before Through the Wire came out, um, we had Kanye was a columnist in Complex magazine.
Wow.
We had a column called Kanye's Fashion Beatdowns, where we would take photos from red carpets, and Kanye would critique other people's outfits. Nobody knew who the hell he was, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of like how ahead of the curve. And our viewpoint was, let's not take you got to remember, back then, even up until that point, GQ and Esquire used to take fashion very seriously. Like, streetwear was kind of this ugly stepchild nobody would cover. And we're
Mhm.
like, wait a second. Streetwear is culture, and streetwear is defining where fashion is going. And also, you can't cover streetwear the way you covered couture fashion. So you needed to bring hip hop from a voice and a tone perspective in a very inclusive nature, almost taking the piss out of things as well, like having a lot of fun with it. And
Yep.
that was like, and look, the Kanye fashion column was just one piece of a very large section of the magazine and vertical in the website. But my point there is, it's more of a specific perspective that we took that was very different at the time. It was a wild step out. Like, to say that people criticized us and dismissed us is the understatement of the year. And the irony is, we were defining where the marketplace was going and what was going to be cool with kids. These guys were looking at everything in a rearview mirror, which is also why they're almost irrelevant now at this point. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Of course, of course. And first of all, amazing. I personally don't even remember Kanye being there, but I mean, to say you had somebody like him, and his influence, up until a couple years ago for obvious reasons.
I can't I can't speak to what occurred after 2014.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and then like again, running a company like that is at the bleeding edge of so many things, and specifically fashion. How has your perspective on the fashion industry changed over time?
Oh, can you be a little bit more like specific? Like, are you talking about like the health of the industry, the dynamism of it? Like, there's so many different ways to think about it. Like,
Yeah,
which way would you want me to?
dynamism specifically.
Okay, so look, um, I think there was a lull for a little while. I think a lot of, if you look at and let's really, talk about this, whether it was, the Virgil move from LVMH perspective to begin with. But
Hmm.
you remember, you have a lot of luxury brands that basically, previously you'd be like, all right, I'm going to go grab Gucci. Let me go grab Tom Ford, or let me go grab Zach Posen, and, other things like that. And it was kind of, and I'm not taking anything away from any of those guys. They're all very elegant and fantastic. But, you know, luxury never took a nod from streetwear until they did, and then they went all in, right? And what you started to see, to me, was ironically, is they let a whole bunch of different people in and wanted different perspectives, but instead of elevating the couture as well, it just proliferated what a new version of streetwear was.
Hmm.
I'm liking where things are moving now from a design perspective. Do I like the price points? Do I think they are incongruent with the people who are actually going to purchase all of these things? Yes. I just don't understand how how any of these brands are going to scale at $180 t-shirts. Like, to me, that's crazy town, right?
And
But
for some brands, that's on the low end, right? So
and right, exactly. I'm being kind, right? But if you really look at the speed at of the iteration and the pressure, right? Fashion has become just, it started to mirror every other industry where it used to be an aberration.
Mhm.
It's become, there's no middle anymore. You're either like super low end, cheap, fast fashion, or you're super high end couture, and people are stretching to buy a signature piece or two from you, right? And the middle is gone. um there's a lot of like, it's just you, as we were discussing before the call, like you see a lot of brands come in try and be like, we're going to be the best new basics, right? And first of all, if I hear that as a narrative
One
again,
more
I'm going to
time.
die laughing. Like, I'm like, oh, another one, really? Like, you're going to redefine basics, right? Fair price basics, with an edge. Like, it's just, okay, have fun with that. So if you look at like kind of where the market's, it's that haves and have nots, right? And what I'm finally starting to see is innovation, not just value, not just trying to make a product cheaper, but you're starting to see really good innovation on the value side, both from the design itself and the quality, because the consumer is demanding it. And then you're starting to see the that higher end take more chances than they probably have before, which I think is good. I just, my worry is if the bottom falls out of the consumer confidence, you have a lot of brands that will be in a hard reset from a business perspective. And then when people, and like when your business starts contracting, you become less dynamic because you'll take less chances because you
Yep.
can't afford to. So, you got to, you can't just look at the design irrespective of the economy, and you can't look at the business side irrespective of the design. You have to think about all those components all at one time.
Yeah. And I know that's been a lot of frustration with people of all levels at fashion companies. It's specifically that business versus design, when it should be how do they coexist and not,
That
fighting.
it's the only way. It's the only way.
Yeah.
Like, look, people used to talk about Chinese walls between like the editorial and the business side of magazines or media brands. I'm sorry, if you're not working together, you're not going to be effective in this day and age. The speed move, the audience moves too differently. The monetization is different than ever before. You need editorial and like verticalized content people involved in the development of products that are monetization oriented. All of that needs to happen. And integration is a word that gets used more than ever, yet enacted and manifested less than ever.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And it was funny. I was listening to an earnings call the other day. I'm blanking on which brand it was, but the CEO or COO was specifically saying, "Oh, hey, I think we're doing a lot more for these upcoming collections. We're gonna, bring it to market a lot faster." And based on what you said and my thoughts before this conversation, going to market faster isn't necessarily the solution, and it's definitely not going to be the silver bullet. It's for all these large scale companies. So
Well,
uh,
not to really get philosophical about this, you know, I have a theory. What fast fashion does is it inherently makes your company reactive by nature. Let me explain. Instead of like you're defining yourself on how fast you can capitalize on an already existing trend. To me, the definition of a fashion company is a company that defines what the trend will be by the forwardness and the coolness of the design itself. Not, oh, here's, long white t-shirts are back. I can get them in my stores faster. That's not a fashion company. That's a business company that happens to be disguising themselves. And so fast fashion to me is it's almost an oxymoron.
yeah, yeah. And then, terrible for the environment.
Let's not. I'm not even.
Yeah.
I don't even.
Which,
That's a whole. That's a whole nother podcast, dude.
right, absolutely. There's the environmental aspect. It's and more times than not, especially for fast fashion brands, a lot of the quality just isn't there because they're so worried on the volume
Dude,
play and the margins are so small.
again, like the customer experience is atrocious, and I mean
Yep.
that both from like online shopping, e-com, as well as in store. I
Hmm.
mean, come on, you're gonna tell me, and I'm not trying to be mean, but you're gonna tell me Zara is a good experience?
They just redid their e-commerce, I think, a year or two ago, and before that, it was like I'm flipping through a picture book. It was very, very bad. So,
Right. And in store is terrible because, to your point, you look, when you pick up a garment, right? Like I'm old. So for me, I'm always like, when you touch something and you're like, wow, nice hand, right?
mhm.
That's gone now because most people don't care about textures, fabrics, quality, all of those. But when you pick up like a piece from some of these places, the stitching is off, the seams are terrible. I'm not trying to be critical, but again, it's not just the quality, but the lack of design, the lack of forwardness. And again, I think great brands define what is cool, not just chase and cover it.
Yeah. And we are losing a lot of that, and honestly, in my opinion, what I've seen is there are a lot of independent brands and the smaller brands that have gotten really popular, like on Instagram specifically. There's a streetwear company, and I'm gonna butcher the name, but it's German. I think it's like Deschutes. But they have a 4-person social media team, and the way I look at it from a marketing lens, they punch so far above their weight. They're doing better than a lot of well-established brands. And I think that really speaks to that scrappiness that you are very, very attuned to.
Yeah. And look, I think here's the other thing is when if you give someone if you show them that you care about the narrative of the brand and the reference of the individual piece, I think you're looking at attracting a very different consumer. And I don't just mean that from like the size of their wallet. I
Hmm.
mean it from somebody who's going to represent and wear that piece and tell that story on your behalf. That's the upside and the gift of going the extra mile as a brand to tell the right story and really having references behind it. You build an army of organic brand ambassadors on their behalf to go out and tell that story. Like when I'm wearing a certain watch and someone goes, oh my God, like, I wear unique watches and things that are less, like you're not going to catch me in a black Rolex Submariner. Like,
Hmm.
sorry, like I'm going to leave that to the bankers. But you know, when someone sees it and I'm like, oh well, this is a very specific AP. It was the first time they worked Audemars Piguet. It's the first time they
Hmm.
worked with the America's Cup and the sailing. And there's a hurricane in one of the chronos, and like it's like this is a 1 of 150 piece, and it. And then people are like, then they get. It's not like, oh my God, that's just beautiful, but there's a level of appreciation. And really, what I just did is sell AP to somebody for them.
Yep. Yep. No, storytelling is super powerful, and I think it always will be,
But it
especially when,
has to be rooted in something real. You
of
can't
course.
just come up with a narrative, right? Like, and or in a positioning, it's got to be real. The references have to be there. You have to do the work and tell the story.
Yeah. I actually think that's the perfect conversation where fragrances are concerned, because I think that's how a lot of fragrance companies, I won't say the specific names, but a lot of fragrance companies have propped themselves up on this narrative that you dig into it and it's just like, no, like this actually isn't true. Like this is just a good story, right? It's like it's not rooted in
I
anything.
mean, look, fragrance, we all know the cost structure of fragrance, right? Like the biggest expense of fragrance is marketing
Yep.
because none of them, I don't care whether it's Baccarat Rouge 540 or Avin, like any, it doesn't matter. Creed, any of the scents, right? By Fredo, any of them. At the end of the day, what's in that bottle that you just paid $400 for probably cost $4 on the high side, right?
Yeah.
There is no narrative. There is quality of ingredients. There is level of someone understanding how, like, does bergamot go with sandalwood very well, and does citrus play with that nicely, and we can get, you can go down that whole thing.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the irony is, all sense, there is no real narrative. It's all created, right? Because it's, you're just trying to get distribution and get people to move to, like, where that scent, because Johnny Depp was on a beach with a blue background somewhere. What is that, Sauvage? I don't even know which one that is, but
Yeah, no,
whatever that is, right?
yeah.
It's just those, nothing is funnier, because those used to be my favorite satire commercials that SNL used to do, right? They
I
used to
do. I
take the
know which
piss
one you're
out of
talking
like cologne commercials all the time, because they're the most ridiculous ones you've ever seen in your life.
Oh yeah, no, it's like the diamonds everywhere and somebody's laying some, yeah, it's there's a little too much going on
Yeah.
sometimes. Awesome, awesome. Wanted to also just talk about the ethos of New York and how you really brought that into Complex. I go to New York multiple times a year. Absolutely love the city. And for people who visit often, or who live there, it's such a unique place that is unlike quite literally anywhere else in the world. So
Well,
how?
it used to be. I don't
Okay.
know how much, like, a lot of the soul. I'm not saying it's gone, but a lot of the soul that was in New York, the creativity,
Hmm.
the beautiful part about New York is, almost unlike any other large city in the globe, including like Tokyo, Paris, London, you had this massive juxtaposition where you weren't defined by class. Um, you had a collision of creators and money and style and everything when this was at the height of New York, right?
Hmm.
And it was just incomparable to any place else on the planet. Um, and that's also why, it was the origin of so many creators and attitudes and people. Look, I'm a Brooklyn kid, right? And it's amazing. Go into, like, any creative place and find out the ratio and percentage of people who've been, like, made it, and then go, how many of them are from Brooklyn? The percentage is way, the proportion of who they are versus how many people came from Brooklyn, it's way off, right? Like, it indexes off the charts. And New York in general, all the boroughs, right? But for Complex, it was very important. Hip hop is such a uh foundationally different genre than any other previous music genre.
Hmm.
um it because it was the first time where the culture and the music were equal partners, whereas before it was always music with a little bit of culture, whether it
Hmm.
was jazz or rock or pop or any of it, right? Very little. The ratio is just off the charts. So attitude and culture were just so much more important. And how could you not disproportionately be and have New York as a massive influence if hip hop was going to be that large of an influence? And I'm not
Yeah.
taking anything away from the West Coast or the South, or, like, all those are beautiful. And we were always very inclusive of that. But at the end of the day, our heart started beating in New York, and it was pervasive across our entire brand from an attitudinal perspective. I mean, it
Got it.
helped define the tone of the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And tell us a little bit more now about your executive chairman role at Uproxx. I'm familiar with the company, but if you want to give everybody kind of a rundown of
Yeah,
what
I
is.
mean, look, I was, I help And it's not just Uproxx, right? So it's, whether it's a state media or at Rap or Fort Nash or something upcoming with a large scale studio play. Um, what I try and do is go in at an executive level and help on a directional basis, right? What is the right way to package and position the company from a differentiated perspective to the audience, from a high level premium basis to the B2B community that is out there? How do we properly capitalize these things? And what does each of these businesses need to look at in 2 and 3 years? Like,
Yep.
I'm not there doing day-to-day improvements on anything on a month-to-month basis. Like, I'll
Mhm.
help that, like, look at that, but at the end of the day, I'm just trying to put larger scale strategies in place, make sure there's smart financial structurings, make sure things are capitalized appropriately. And we're looking at the macro picture for each of these companies as much as absolutely possible. So for me, I get to do, I'm smiling a little, and I'm not smirking, I'm smiling, because I kind of am lucky in that I get to do the most exciting parts without also really having to get my hands dirty too much in the day to day, which is the very frustrating part of running and building businesses. So, I thank God I'm not a day-to-day executive anywhere, like I was saying before.
Mhm.
God bless legal and HR and operations, but those are not my focal points, right? So I get to do the stuff I'm best at, and I get to have a disproportionate, hopefully positive impact and influence over the direction of these companies, not the day-to-day performance.
Got it. Totally makes sense. And last question before I let you go. I know we were talking about this before the interview, but AI is obviously talked about literally every day from every single person. And what are your thoughts on how AI is going to positively as well as negatively affect creative industries specifically?
Um, you know, to me, look, I think this is really industry agnostic, not creative or not, right? I really don't think I don't. The delineation is important, but it's going to become less and less important very quickly. I look at AI this way: really smart people are going to look at AI as an effectiveness booster, not an efficiency booster only. And let me be specific. Like, I've said this before. Like, the way I look at AI is, it's like a football field. Here's 100 yards, right? The first 10 yards are the human that is asking for, and I'm not talking about the agentic stuff as we continue to grow, but like right now, like the best use case would be like, here's what some of the issues, problems, challenges, and opportunities are, and he, like, so here's the best prompts that go in the first 10 yards. The next 80 yards is AI, and then there's the manual additional prompts, manual editing, manual, making it human again, per se, and specific, that is, that the computer will continue to learn on. But that's your 100 yards, right? That to me is the best use case. And if you're doing that appropriately, I would look at, like, let's say I was running a media company and I had 45 editors. Most people right now are looking and going, well, the 45 editors are putting out 200 pieces of content a day, right? I'm making it simple.
Hmm.
Most business leaders are looking at it and going, how do I take those 45 and replace some of them with AI, take it down to 15 and still put out 200 pieces of content? I would look at it differently. I would go, well, how do I teach all 45 of these people to use AI as an effectiveness increaser, so that we could maybe increase the volume a little bit, but disproportionately increase the quality of the post,
Hmm.
disproportionately increase the smartness and intelligence of the distribution? How do we iterate the format? How do we overall put out a better product that is amplified more effectively? I'm not looking to replace jobs. I'm looking to take the same amount of investment and amplify it greatly. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that will look at it as an efficiency tool exclusively. And it's the lazy man's way of looking at it versus the growth mindset around AI.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
No, it definitely does. And honestly, like, I think that's the part that gets lost in conversation that you alluded to, even if you didn't specifically hit on it, is the human element, right?
That's right.
Is that like businesses aren't run by AI, they're run by humans. And, you know,
For now.
for now, and the all the layoffs and hiring freezes, I think companies are really doing themselves a disservice to say, you know, like, hey, like this is an opportunity for us to train a workforce. And not only are you equipping people, I know one of your big things is always, you know, being able to help bring people up and, you know, leave people better than when you first met them. And that's an executive's opportunity right now, specifically in tech. And I think they're really missing the boat right now.
Well, if think about it this way. I mean, I know that I wouldn't be able to be as effective across as many companies if I didn't use AI effectively to scale myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I mean, look, it's been unbelievable for me. The speed at which I can work and the ability to impact more people without anywhere near as much volume of work. So I can have what used to take me 15 hours of work and conversations, I can now do in 3.
Yeah.
So how many more people can I talk to? How many more companies can I work with? How many more CEOs can I help?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Rich, thanks again for joining today. This was an awesome conversation. Really appreciate your perspective and hearing about your journey. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, sir. And good luck with everything.
I appreciate it.